que todavía hay mucha gente allá en el break, pero vamos a comenzar con una parte introductoria que es un video sobre el Parque Tecnológico de Yucatán, para introducirnos en el tema y seguir con los conferencistas que nos hacen el favor de darnos toda su información. Yo creo que empezamos con el video.
Yucatán, innovación para conquistar el futuro. Investigación científica, procesos de innovación y educación superior de calidad para ser un referente en economía global del conocimiento y polo de formación de recursos humanos de alto nivel en el sureste de México, Centroamérica y el Caribe. Ecosistema. El CDTI, Sistema de Investigación, Innovación y Desarrollo Tecnológico de Yucatán, está formado por 11 instituciones nacionales e internacionales que hacen investigación en 9 áreas. Agrobiotecnología, ecología marina, acuacultura y pesca sustentable, tecnologías para la sustentabilidad, tecnologías de la información y telecomunicaciones, física de materiales y nanomateriales, salud en enfermedades tropicales, turismo y logística. Yucatán tiene la mayor masa crítica del sureste, con más de 1,000 investigadores científicos, 549 pertenecientes al Sistema Nacional de Investigadores y 48 programas en el Padrón de Excelencia del CONACYT. Parque Científico y Tecnológico de Yucatán. El Parque Científico y Tecnológico de Yucatán es la materialización de la política de innovación, vinculada a las necesidades para el desarrollo económico, social y ambiental. 221 hectáreas. Ubicación geográfica estratégica, cercana al puerto de altura, la zona industrial de Yucatán, al aeropuerto internacional. Es un parque de cuarta generación, en el que se han invertido más de 1,000 millones de pesos en la primera etapa y el cual se distingue por la innovación abierta, redes virtuales de creación y transferencia de conocimiento, laboratorios comunes de experimentación, tecnología de punta en telecomunicaciones, incubación y recursos financieros integrados para el desarrollo de empresas de alta tecnología. El Parque Científico y Tecnológico ofrece los servicios de Biblioteca Central, Unidad de Vinculación, Unidad Académica para estudiantes de posgrado, Unidad Habitacional con espacio para alojar 350 personas, Unidad de Gestión del Conocimiento, Jardín Botánico, Difusión Escolar de la Ciencia, Museo del Cráter de Chicxulub con el respaldo de la UNAM. La principal fortaleza del Parque Científico y Tecnológico es el uso compartido de los laboratorios especializados como el Banco de Germoplasma, Biofábrica, Planta Productora de Semillas, Laboratorio de Energías Renovables, Laboratorio y Observatorio Regional del Agua, Centro de Innovación Tecnológica en Polímeros, Laboratorio y Planta Piloto de Alimentos, Laboratorio de Micropropagación, las nuevas instalaciones de Biología Molecular, Química y Matemáticas Aplicadas de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, UNAM, y también del Centro de Investigación en Matemáticas, CIMAT, ubican a Yucatán como sitio estratégico para el desarrollo científico y tecnológico. El Parque Científico y Tecnológico también es un factor para la inversión para empresas de base tecnológica de alto valor y con enfoque de innovación. Yucatán, polo de competitividad global en tecnologías de la información. Yucatán tiene el primer centro de innovación en tecnologías de la información en México, en alianza con el Consejo Nacional de Ciencia y Tecnología, CONACYT, y la Cámara Nacional de la Industria Electrónica, de Telecomunicaciones y Tecnologías de la Información, CANIETI. El objetivo es poner a México y Yucatán en la vanguardia en el diseño de tecnologías que están definiendo el proceso productivo mundial. El Centro de Innovación y Desarrollo Heurístic es el nodo articulador del Clúster Regional de Tecnologías de la Información, con orientación hacia Automation of Knowledge Work, supercómputo y análisis de Big Data. Productividad alimentaria. En el Parque Científico y Tecnológico de Yucatán existen las condiciones para ser un campo más productivo y con valor agregado. Para ampliar las capacidades del CIATEC se inaugura el Laboratorio de Inocuidad y Trazabilidad Alimentaria del Sureste, para que los productos yucatecos puedan acceder a todos los mercados mundiales, al cumplir los lineamientos de sanidad. El Parque Científico Tecnológico de Yucatán es una propuesta abierta para impulsar la ciencia, la innovación y potenciar las capacidades y recursos del sureste de México. Ciencia para encontrar soluciones a los retos de nuestra sociedad. Innovación para transformar la economía. Con el Parque Científico y Tecnológico de Yucatán conquistamos el futuro y movemos a México.
Mover a México. Gobierno de la República.
Les voy a presentar al doctor Walt Magnussen, que es el director de Telecomunicaciones de la Universidad de Texas A&M y es presidente de la Asociación Profesionales en la Educación Superior en Tecnologías de Comunicación. Walt, por favor, ¿quieres estar aquí o quieres estar por allá? Gracias.
Good morning. It's okay, guys. Good morning, everyone. And I'm sorry, my Spanish is pretty much non-existent. So I guarantee you, your English is much, much better than my Spanish. So in spite of the fact that I've been working here in Mexico for about 30 years now. So first of all, Texas A&M is very proud and honored to be a part of the technology park that you just saw in the Yucatan. So we have a long tradition and history of working with our brothers and sisters in Mexico, really starting about 30 years ago, and we've had centers in Mexico City. More recently, we've established a facility in San Miguel de Allende, and then the most recent one then here will be the research facility up here in the Yucatan. These projects are very, very important to us, and again, we were very honored when this first started to be invited by the governor of the state of Yucatan to come down and assist with some of the background technology, not only with what we're doing at our center, but also we're at our office in the center, but also with what's happening here throughout the Yucatan, and more importantly, you'll see during this presentation how that impacts the rest of the country of Mexico. With our facility in the Yucatan, we'll be joining some other fantastic Mexican universities, and some of the national labs will be up there as well. So we feel again kind of dwarfed with all the power that will be up in that area, but looking very much forward to it. Next slide there. Okay. The project that I'll be talking about this morning is the initiative that we did with the governor's office in the Yucatan. They asked us to talk a little bit about lessons learned of sharing and collaboration and peering in the United States, because peering is something that CUDI has really started driving and pushing here in Mexico, and we've been able to successfully leverage that in the U.S., and obviously doing those peering relationships in Mexico are equally as important. And then what do we do about the applications, and then what do we do about the research and education? Because obviously all of us are here because we support the professors and the faculty and the staff and the students in our institutions. So it's real important that they have good infrastructure to support that as well. And I'll talk a little bit about the recommendations that we had made to the governor's office. This was a project that was reported back in September of 2014 when the governor of Yucatan came to College Station, and we presented at that time as well. Next slide. You know, the reason we're pushing the network initiatives is this is our history of where we've been since 2009 and what's happening in the utilization. You can see basically we're doubling utilization, doubling traffic about every 18 months. So again, when I first started working with CUDI, probably 10, 15, 20 years ago, started off as an OC3 network, so we had 150 meg and saturated it. It's transitioned up to a gig and into 10 gig more recently, but now if you look at it, if you're doubling approximately every 18 months, you can kind of draw that line out, and you can see that 10 gig is only going to take you so far. So one of the things that we want to help support, and we want to help CUDI and help the Yucatan and help all the institutions in Mexico do this, is make sure that that actually happens, so that when our research institutions are here and when our researchers are here working in Mexico, that they have the resources and capabilities here that they've come to know and love and expect in the States. This is basically just A&M. This is about, we're peaking right now at about 7 to 10 gig on a daily basis, just with our one university. We also then peer with the University of Texas system, with the Texas Tech system, and with the State of Texas network. And typically, we're usually pushing about 20 gigabits per 20 gig per second on average per day now. So it's gone, even since 2014, it's gone from about 6 to 7 gig to about 20 gig. And so right now we're in a process of transitioning over to a 100 gigabit ring going around the state of Texas, connecting the institutions in Texas to each other. That is ultimately the kind of capabilities, and those are the types of things that we would love to help support and see in Mexico as well. Next slide. So we have all this traffic, we have all this information. What do we, how do we make sure that we're utilizing it? How do we make sure that we actually are getting to the people that we really need to get to? This is the concept of peering, and this is exactly what CUDI is doing in Mexico. So what we've done here is we've established a network to where we have a core network internally. In this case here, this is our network. We peer, we get connection. We get a 20 gig connection right now from level 3. Working with the University of Texas, we also get a 20 gig connection from CenturyLink, and then we use straight BGP routing to make sure that we just pick the best path. So it actually, to us, appears to be one network. When we do have one network go down, the other network picks up automatically. But then we also work with Internet 2 on the commodity peering service. Thank you. We also work with Internet 2 on the commodity peering service, and that's where we pick up Microsoft and Google and those kind of folks, because again, we don't want that to come across this connection here. Why don't we want it to come across that connection? Because of that guy right there. There's a meter on there. We pay for every bit on the network that we utilize on this pipe. We pay for every bit we use on that pipe and on that pipe. So the more traffic we can transition up to the peered connections, the better off we are. That keeps our overall cost down. But then we also peer with Internet 2, and Internet 2 then, this connection here, and currently we just upgraded that one to a 100 gig connection in the Houston area. That connection now is where CUDI comes in. So CUDI is directly connected to the Internet 2 peering point in Houston. And we even have a few direct peers with folks like Netflix and Google and stuff like that. So they come directly onto the network, so that we don't even take that through the Internet 2 peering site. So in essence, we try to get as close, directly connected to the folks as we possibly can. Right now, most of the stuff prior to the recent CUDI peering point in Mexico, most traffic that you had, if you were going from this network, if you were going, let's say, from this network to this network to this network in Mexico, was all coming back to the United States. And the service providers in the United States love that, because they charge for absolutely everything they do. So that's in essence where these peering points, these peering relationships pretty much have to happen. Next slide. So what do we see on the traffic? We see about 22% of it is peering. No guess, no surprise, 11% of it is Netflix, so the students love their video. The Internet 2 traffic is about 33%, and that again includes things like, we get 33% of it from Internet 2 in Houston, and then 23% from Internet 2 in Dallas. So we actually have 2 peering points we happen to be fortunate in that there are actually 2 Internet 2 peering points in the state of Texas. So we pick up connections on both of them. And then Google, Microsoft, and everything else. So the commodity traffic basically is the TR, CPS in there. That's the rest of the traffic. But this basically is what we're seeing on the peering utilization. That doesn't include the commodity traffic. That's not the level 3 and the CenturyLink, but that's what we see across the peering connections. Next slide. This is the Internet 2 backbone in the United States. Pretty much it's built on Sienna DWDM, so we've got dark fibers from level 3. Has the ability to support 88 100 gig waves, so we have 8.8 terabits per second capacity on it before we outgrow it. The only reason I brought this slide in is because it looks an awful lot like the next slide, and that's the national backbone in Mexico. Now, you've probably seen this slide several times over the last couple of days, so I'm not, or over the last day, so I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that. But the challenge that we're working here within this is, of course, our connection here, our Yucatan office, is going to be up in this location here, and you can see it's kind of at the end of some medium-sized pipes, and it's also at the end of the pipes, which basically means there's no outside connection on that. So working with CUDI and working with the National Science Foundation and everything else. Next slide. We were looking at how do we improve that. So we went to the National Science Foundation, again, CUDI was one of the major partners on this, and put in a proposal to do some peering, increase the peering that would bring CUDI into 10 gig in the US initially, but then ultimately go ahead and take it up to 40 gig and 100 gig. That's the good news. Bad news is, next slide. These are the goals here. Basically, it was a 10 gig for 2015 to 17, and by 2018 and 2019 up to 100 gig. Bad news is it didn't get funded. So the National Science Foundation opted for other priorities. So what do you do when dad tells you no? You go ahead and ask mom, right? So the bottom line here is that we don't anticipate taking no for an answer. We're going to keep trying. We're going to keep pushing at this. Go ahead and next slide. So this here was the backbone itself. But again, you see what happened there is initially what was proposed was a connection going from Miami down to Panama City, coming back through most of Central America. The Central American connections also is a real challenge because that would be based on terrestrial fiber, and it is difficult to really get terrestrial fiber across a lot of Central America for political reasons. So next slide. Go ahead and let's skip through this one then. Next slide. So that leads us here to, with having a little bit of background, that leads us to what we're talking about here as far as what we've done in the Yucatan. So we came up with some primary recommendations for the Yucatan connection. One of them was to actually create a Merida IXP as well, an internet peering service here in Merida to support all of the Yucatan. So Cozumel, Cancun, the connections back up from central Mexico, but then also hopefully use that as a hopping off point to get out of the Yucatan to get directly up to Miami. So that was one of the major goals we're trying to do here, is establish it to where, you know, the Yucatan is important, but it becomes more important if it's a stepping off point to get to a secondary or a third connection into the United States. Because again, we've got the one in El Paso at Juarez. We have the San Diego, Tijuana, and then we looked at Nogales under the NSF, but that one became problematic. One of the challenges we really have, though, with the Tijuana connection is that a lot of the CUDI fiber network is based on utility lines. Those utility lines don't go up into the Baja Peninsula. So in essence, we need to really either use Nogales or expand El Paso, or again, Miami. So increase the bandwidth. Go ahead and keep that last slide again there, please. So the next part of it was to increase the bandwidth and utilization from CUDI into the peninsula. Again, Carlos and you know, everybody else in CUDI has been working on that for a while. So we want to do everything we can to help support that. Upgrade the Yucatan local services to digital and convert them, more importantly, from WiMAX to LTE. So how many of you are using the WiMAX services across Mexico? I know Guadalajara is, right? And I know the Yucatan is. And any other sites that you know of that are on the WiMAX currently? Okay. So the FCC in Mexico issued frequencies to education a number of years ago to support local area access, because access in a local area is the tough part. Getting it into the region is not as difficult because there's often fiber in the region, but getting it from the region the last mile is always tough. So those frequencies were used initially in Mexico pretty extensively in some of the areas to use on WiMAX. At 12 o'clock, Steve Cropper and I are going to be talking about WiMAX was great, it was a good start, it needs to go away, it needs to die. So what do we replace it with? LTE. And kind of my equivalence on that is, you know, when they first started out, we had Ethernet and token ring. Most of you probably don't remember that because a lot of you were just born then. But originally we had Ethernet and token ring. Token ring lost the battle. It went away, it died. And everything now is Ethernet. So with LTE and WiMAX, it's going the same route. So at 12 o'clock, we'll be talking about that transition. But then if we're going to really beef up the network here in the Yucatan, we need to add additional services. So we looked at the voice over IP services, IPTV services, which, you know, is basically the triple play. We can use the triple play to extend video capabilities in terms of entertainment, soccer games and things like that, but also many of you are using it to, utilizing it to talk about, or to support things like, you know, educational television programming and distance learning and stuff like that. And then last thing really is the high performance computing, and how do we really go ahead and share resources, because not every institution is going to be able to afford a large cluster. So how do we get the bandwidth up high enough to where we can afford to share these clusters? Next slide. Okay, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the IXP because I think that's probably already been discussed a couple times here during the session. But again, we were fully supportive of the concept of doing the peering here in Merida. And next slide. You know, it looked at what was really required to do that. There's a lot of technical expertise up here. More important, it's really tough to get the internet service providers to really want to do this peering because they view it as taking away their competitive edge. Realistically, it benefits everybody, so it seems like eventually they typically end up signing on, but you know, it takes a while. Some of them are a little bit, some of the smaller ones are a little bit faster to join. Then you have the large giants, and they kind of have to drag them along a little bit. So it sometimes takes a while longer to do that. Same experience we've had in the United States. Go ahead, next slide. Okay, we also highly recommended that when you establish the communications point, communications facility in Merida, one of the things that we have found is really important is often to do a standalone communications building that does nothing but standalone communications. This is one of them that we've built. We've built about 5 of these on campus. They're about 20 feet by 30 feet. The important thing is that they are standalone. They're not under the control or jurisdiction of any one institution. Because the problem when you start dealing with things like research parks and collaborative networks, everybody wants to be in charge. And the problem is if everybody wants to be in charge, you often end up with issues of not getting it done because of the fact that we're dealing with the battles of who's gonna be in the lead. You establish a neutral facility, everybody has access, everybody's in there, and you know, those buildings are not very expensive to build in the States. Probably, my guess is here, you probably would build it for 1/10 the cost of what it costs us in the States, and it'd be a much better building anyway. So, so you know, that kind of facility ends up really helping quite a bit. Next slide. Also looked at basically making sure that we have direct fiber access to the research park itself. How many of you are familiar with the concept of the research park as being built here in the Yucatan? It's about halfway between Merida and the coast itself. Wonderful road has been built out there. When we looked at it, I was looking at the possibility of what it would take to get fiber out there and look at the telephone poles or look at the power lines alongside the road. There's already fiber on them. So obviously folks have been thinking ahead on this. So connectivity-wise and everything else is all very viable at this point. So I think you're going to really see a wonderful facility. Right now it's out in the middle of the country. It's out in the middle of nowhere. But that also is the same way that Texas A&M International in Laredo was about 12 years ago. The first time I went there, it was basically a large deer hunting area. Nothing around at all. Since that facility went in, schools have built up, neighborhoods have built up, stores have built up. It's greatly expanded. And I'm willing to bet that if you look at this research park area 5 years from now, you'll see the same thing there. Next slide. This is kind of the crux of what we've been recommending then too, is that in essence, Carlos has been working with the folks in the Yucatan to first of all expand out the fiber connections into the Yucatan so there's higher speed, and again on the power grid, fiber, the ability to do that is already there. Do the peering then between two states, Quintana Roo and Yucatan, up in the peninsula. But then once we've done that, then establish a fiber peering point that gets us actually up into Miami and gets us directly on one of the fiber paths. So what you would then ultimately see would be, then, thing is on, but it doesn't seem to, there it is, it's pretty dim. So what you would see really would be the 10 or the 100 gig connection coming down from El Paso, actually, El Paso's actually up in here, coming down from El Paso down into the core network, but then being expanded up here, up to Miami, and then that connection going back to El Paso. So now what you really see is, in essence, the presence of a 100 gig ring that connects Mexico in two directions and gets us back into the international research and education networks. Next slide. Again, like I said, one of the important things here is to make sure that the local access is sufficient as well, and that's, again, hopefully, you've got access to these educational frequencies across the entire country. It really, now especially since LTE is around, it makes more sense to look at expanding out to LTE as well. But again, that's a 12 o'clock presentation, so I'm not going to talk about it a whole lot at this time. Next slide. And then the additional services would again be the IPTV. So we've been able to work with actually a Boston company, a Harvard startup, on providing some distribution capabilities of video using, again, once you've got a high-speed network, you can easily go ahead and distribute the video and share it. And one of the things we have the ability to do there is put in distributive caching servers to where we're not using the same pipe to have everybody feed it. And then we also are working with a company that's out of Belgium called Tactic, and we'll be talking about that service, that application at 11:30 as well. So again, it's a platform that lets us share video and collaborative tools for not only education, but also for entertainment. Emergency notification, especially in this area here, we're not very far from the coast, and hurricanes and typhoons and everything else do hit. We need to be able to get the word out very rapidly. So one of the things that we've been doing in the United States, in fact, I'm working right now on a project with Homeland Security where I'll be with them a couple times a month for the next 5 months, where we're trying to figure out how to utilize the networks and use IP-based services to very, very rapidly distribute that information. We've been doing that since the 1950s and 1960s in a relay system using radios. We called it the Emergency Broadcast Service. This radio station, KBTX, hears it, and it translates it to the next tower, which translates it to the next tower, which translates it to the next tower. That system was actually established in the 1950s because of nuclear war possibility. It wasn't tested until a year and a half ago. So nationwide tests just happened for the first time ever. Didn't work all that well, but it was finally tested. We're also saying it needs to go away, it needs to die. We need to have a fast, reliable way of notifying all citizens when something happens. And then next generation 911, we're hoping to work with the UNAM on that. And that's a technology that lets citizens call in emergency calls. And 911 typically hasn't been as widely distributed, widely utilized in the United States, because in the past, E911 was very expensive, very complicated. The world is transitioning over to NG911, which is next generation 911. It's internet-based, it's more cost effective, it's more reliable, and in Mexico it's been mandated, but there's not a direction as to how to really do it yet. So what we're hoping is that the higher ed community in Mexico, the same as we're doing in the US, we're helping to push the technology, because we have experience in dealing with internet applications and internet protocols. Public safety doesn't. They don't have an idea of what this stuff really is, and they're asking for help. Next slide. What do we do with it then? Basically, once the network is there, we have the ability to share high performance computing. I think you talked yesterday to some folks from the University of Miami that are working in that space as well. So that, don't need to spend a lot of time on that one. And then the last slide. So this was the most fun part of the project. Next slide, please. This was the most fun part of the project. So one of the things the governor of the Yucatan did was to fund a number of students to come to the United States to do a couple of things. One of them was, and they were there for summer. These are students that were finishing up their bachelor's degrees in Mexico, wanted to go on, get their master's or their PhD. So in the morning, they would take GRE prep tests. They would take TOEFL English language proficiency tests. In the afternoon, they would do research. They would work in the labs. I direct one of the research centers at Texas A&M University. So these are the 6 students from the Yucatan that were part of my lab in the afternoon for that summer. Fantastic students. We worked on WebRTC applications, primarily WebRTC in 2014 was just starting. So, and this is out at our ranch, out at the house. So they were having fun with the horses and the ranch and everything else. So we had them out to the house for dinner. Again, fantastic folks. 2 of them in this group here did get accepted to A&M and are working on their advanced degrees there. A couple of them chose to go to other schools in the United States. I was sorry to hear that, but hey, you know, getting the opportunity to work on your master's and your doctorate anywhere is great. So this was really my favorite part of the whole project. So, okay. Any quick questions?
En English or Spanish, José nos puede ayudar en la traducción, que también es colaborador de Texas A&M.
Jose's a close colleague and friend for probably the last 20, 25, 30 years, ever since I've been working here in Mexico. So Jose is working with a company that will be talking again at 11:30 about their application as well. So, any questions, any ideas, anything we should be doing differently? All right. With that, thank you very much.